What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for turning to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson. I'm so glad you decided to join us here for another Inside Pitt practice report coming to you from the south side of Pittsburgh after practice number 12 of Pitt training camp. It was a big day at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex, not just because it was the beginning of week 3, but this was the first time we got to see the Panthers and talk to them after their first scrimmage of training camp. So we'll go right ahead and start there. The Panthers scrimmaged on Saturday morning at Acrisure Stadium. They were hoping to do a night scrimmage, but some rain unfortunately pushed them back to earlier in the morning. According to Pat Narduzzi, they ran 155 plays between the offense and the defense. They did first, second, and third team together. They do not count the third team towards their point and scoring system to see who won the scrimmage. But between the first and second teams, the offense emerged as the winner. We've been hearing a lot about how good the offense has been during training camp, and they proved that again in the opening scrimmage. Pat Narduzzi said the deep balls were flying all over the place from Phil Dracovic, Nate Yarnell, and Christian Veillere. Guys like Bub Means, Chen Mbwako, Jake McConaughey, Kenny Johnson, and Dejon Reynolds were on the receiving ends of those deep passes. This just continues a trend, like I said, that we've heard throughout all of training camp, is that this offense is not just looking improved, but looking different. It's not, when you think about the home run balls or the big plays that this offense is hitting on, it's not Israel Abanikanda ripping up the middle for a 60-yard touchdown. It's coming through the air. It's coming out of the hand of Phil Dracovic and usually going to the hands of guys like Kenny Johnson and Bub Means, like I mentioned, but some other names involved as well. But Pat Narduzzi also was really jazzed about how the offense limited the turnovers, especially between the first and second teams. He said there was just 2 turnovers in total, a fumbled center quarterback exchange with the third team, and then with the first team, what he called an ESPN highlight interception from MJ Devonshire. Guy was an all ACC corner a year ago. So, something that he understands and something that he is, wasn't as disappointed about. He was really proud of how they limited turnovers and kept the ball and maintained possession. And that's one of the things that he highlights every time we talk to him about scrimmages, is that, you know, being able to hang onto the ball. If you can do that, if the offense can hang onto the ball, they'll usually win. If the defense can force turnovers, they'll usually come out on top in these scrimmages. But like we talked about, there's been a ton of praise for the offense. And, even reading between the lines a little bit today, Pat Narduzzi did talk a little bit about how he had hoped to see more from his defense. He needs the defense to step up a little bit and make some plays. He did sound a little bit disappointed and a little bit critical. I can read you this quote. He said, "Got to make plays on defense, defensively, stop the run. It's kind of what we do, so we know what we are, we know who we are." And I was happy with overall with where we are coming out of that scrimmage. But you can tell he wants a little bit more from his defense. We've heard a lot about the offense, but Pat Narduzzi is a defensive guy. He wants them to stand up. Last year, I feel like this Pitt team hung their hat a lot on what the defense was able to do, causing turnovers, stopping the run, things like that. So you can tell that he's looking for a little bit more. In these inter-squad scrimmages, someone's always going to be disappointed. When the offense wins, you can talk about how the defense didn't look very good. When the defense doesn't look very good, you talk about how the offense didn't, or when the defense wins, excuse me, you can talk about how the offense didn't look very good. But, it's been all offense so far, like I said. So we'll be keeping an eye out on the defense for some improvements coming over the next couple of weeks when there should be more scrimmage opportunities in addition to team drills and practice and such. But sticking with that defense, there was one standout that Pat Narduzzi mentioned. That was safety Philip O'Brien, PJ O'Brien. O'Brien's in the running for one of those starting spots at safety, and by the way it sounds, it seems like he's right up there with Javon McIntyre as one of those guys who's in the lead for a starting safety spot. He hasn't been labeled a starter in the same way that Javon McIntyre has. Pat Narduzzi has explicitly said Javon McIntyre is a starter. Whether or not that holds up through the end of training camp and into the start of the regular season, we'll see. But O'Brien is a guy who says he's been running with McIntyre most of the time. That's his primary guy he's manning those back 2 safety spots with. And since McIntyre's starter, you have to assume that they kind of hold O'Brien in that same realm and with that same have that same kind of praise and same kind of respect for what he's done on the field. He's also got some experience, which guys like Donovan McMillan and Stephon Hall, who are also competing for that job, don't have. But I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee just yet that O'Brien is that you can pencil O'Brien into that starting spot. Stephon Hall had a third takeaway sticker on his helmet. That's most of anyone on the team. So he's making big plays, really important plays in the secondary. And Pat Narduzzi talked about him as a guy who's progressing alongside McMillan. So there's clearly two, I think, leaders in the safety competition right now, but nothing guaranteed, especially if Stephon Hall continues to progress at the rate that he has and continues to make plays at the rate that he has. There's nothing for sure in that safety spot yet. So that was a scrimmage. Sounds like a lot of encouraging things from the offense, maybe a little bit of room for improvement for the defense. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I want to move on to some of our interviews that we had today. And today was a really great crop of interviews. We got to talk to offensive coordinator Frank Signetti, O'Brien, and then wide receiver Bub Means. And they were really informative, and I really enjoyed talking to those guys. But I'm going to start with Frank Signetti because I feel like he really encompassed a lot of what the themes of training camp have been, especially as the offensive coordinator during a year when the offense has been one of the biggest storylines. He had more praise to heap on the offense, specifically the passing offense. He's was pretty certain that they will throw the deep ball more. That's something that we've heard the players talk about, and Pat Narduzzi talk about a little bit as well. But Signetti was very specific. He said, "We are going to play to our strengths." Last year, that meant running the ball with Israel Bandakanda behind a really experienced offensive line. This year, it means something a little different because this team is better equipped to throw the deep ball and throw a little bit more often. He put it out that Phil Dracovic, the guy you can almost write in Sharpie as the starter for week one against Wofford, he has knowledge of the system. He's played in it this will be his, I believe, his fourth year playing in Frank Signetti's system. He has better accuracy, according to Frank Signetti, and he's been able to make plays outside of the pocket and scramble, which I think is something we might have assumed about Phil and about his just based on his profile and based on his past career at Boston College, but maybe he hadn't seen just yet, especially before the pads came on and before these guys were competing in scrimmages that were somewhat live. But now Jerkovic's shown off his legs a little bit more and showing how he can not just run for first downs or anything, but also extend plays and find different angles to use his arm within the passing game, using his legs to extend those plays. But Frank Signetti was also complimentary of all his quarterbacks, said that throwing the ball deep plays to all of their skills. They're big guys with great pocket presence, but also that mobility exists with Jerkovic, Veyer, and Yarnell. All those guys are capable of doing that. But he also pointed to the returning wide receivers. He's really a believer in that wide receiver core, not just Means and Kanata Mumfield who are coming back, but he was also very complimentary of those four freshmen that we've talked about, called Kenny Johnson, a really special player and person. Said Zion Fowler has unbelievable ball skills, compared him to Mohamed Sanu, who Frank Signetti worked with when he was at Rutgers. And then said Seymour and Polk have continued to be, Lamar Seymour and Israel Polk, have been outstanding for them through spring ball and summer training camp, despite dealing with some injuries. So he has a lot of optimism about what that receiving core can do. He also pointed to the tight end room, said them under position coach Tim Salem have made probably the biggest improvements from last year to this year, from last training camp to this year. Said Gavin Bartholomew is in great shape, improved route runner and improved pass catcher, in addition to kind of what we already knew about him, that he's insanely athletic and a great blocker. So, and a real tough guy. So, that group really has him encouraged as well. And you just think about the shift that this team has had in strengths, losing some key offensive linemen, and obviously Israel Abanikanda. The mood kind of shifts, the energy kind of shifts. Keaton Slovis out, even with the new quarterback in, the Panthers are much more optimistic about their passing offense and especially the ability to break some big plays deep. So that was definitely notable, and that was definitely apparent when you're talking to, you know, the offensive coordinator. Bub Means and Christian Veyer, who we've talked to at other points during training camp, Kenny Johnson as well. Those guys can tell, Dejon Reynolds too. But you expect those guys to be really complimentary of what the passing game is doing. Those are quarterbacks and receivers, so they really are going to be optimistic kind of no matter what. But when Frank Signetti the guy who's going to be calling the plays is telling you that, yeah, no, this is what we're going to do. This is who we are. This is what we're going to be good at. This is where our talent is. You start to believe it a little bit more, and that's what you really take into account. I do also want to touch on Bub Means for a little bit. Like I said, we got to talk to him today, and I think we've talked a lot about the physical skills and what Means has been able to bring as a deep threat. He's, not necessarily bigger, but a little bit stronger. I think a little bit faster. I think he's definitely much more comfortable in the offense. He definitely just looks more comfortable as a receiver. If you remember, he was recruited to Louisiana Tech as a defensive back, so that was half of his career right there, playing a completely different position. So he was kind of, when you think about his struggles at times last year, he came in during the summer, was still adjusting to a new position, then had a new offense and a new place to learn as well. You can kind of understand and maybe give him some grace about, some of the things that happened last year and just maybe some of the things that were disappointing. And that can also lead you to believe the hype a little bit, believe that there is a big year coming for Bub Means. But what I really want to talk about is what Frank Signetti said about just his leadership and his knowledge of the offense that goes hand in hand with the physical skills and what he's going to do on the field. But it was the combination of leadership and knowledge that Means has started to show during training camp. It's not just knowing when something is needed. That's kind of the leadership part, needed from a teammate or from the unit, but knowing how to deliver it too. That's the knowledge part of being able to say, this is what a certain player needs at this moment. This is how I can help kind of coach him up and be an extension of the coaching staff and make him feel a little bit better and get us moving in the right direction. So all encouraging things about Bub Means, who we've heard a lot about, and we'll probably continue to hear more good things about him throughout training camp. Next, I want to just look forward real quickly to what we can see from the rest of camp and what we can see from the rest of week 3 and possibly heading into another scrimmage that I expect at the end of the week as well. It's been all offense, like I said, but how does this defense respond? It's possible that we get at least another 2 scrimmages. That's what I'd expect before the end of training camp. And we haven't heard a whole lot about the defensive line. We've heard about the safeties and the corners making plays. We've heard about the linebackers getting tons of turnovers like they've continued to do. But what's this D line going to do? Charlie Partridge has earned the benefit of the doubt and being able to turn over defensive line talent and make sure that Pitt is still super disruptive in that area. But we haven't heard a whole lot about them in terms of, their plays they're making in 11 on 11 or in scrimmages. So I'm excited. I'm interested to see what comes of the defensive line now and how they kind of respond to some wins for the offense and a lot of hype being built around the offense as well. But thinking back on the offensive side of the ball as well, I want to see who separates themselves in that wide receiver room. It's real crowded still. Pat Narduzzi identified Jake McConaughey, Kenny Johnson, Zion Fowler-L, and Dejon Reynolds as some standouts so far, but that's 4 guys fighting for maybe one starting spot, definitely only one starting spot, but maybe just even 2 rotational spots. And it's a deep wide receiver room, but how deep are they actually? On paper, I think we can expect a lot of this group, but are we hearing a lot about how good this group is because they're actually that good? Are they as good as advertised, or is this just what Pitt has and they're reaching around trying to find someone still to separate themselves? So we'll see how that works itself out through the rest of camp. We'll get more detailed looks at them. Eventually we'll have more scrimmages to talk about and some more data in that area. But for right now, those are still some lingering questions surrounding the Pitt Panthers as we get almost halfway through training camp and get a little bit closer to the season opener against Wofford on September 2nd. With that, we're going to close this one out here. Practice report number 12 a practice report after practice number 12 from Pitt training camp. Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. I'm Stephen Thompson. Make sure to like this video and to subscribe to us. That's youtube.com/Inside the Panthers. And make sure to follow all the reporting coming straight from training camp at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex at InsideThePanthers.com. Until next time, we'll come back out with you with another Inside Pitt practice report tomorrow after practice 13. Until then,